Hello and welcome back to Health Unlock, the power of salutogenesis with Jason. Jason, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Uh, we are catching up back on our train now, the content train, the podcast train. But the podcast is still doing great. A lot of good feedback, and I was happy to hear that you had a good experience even at the conference that you were telling. Lots of interest. So um, the that's always promising that when things come together. How are you feeling otherwise?
Pretty good. Yeah, I actually just got back I went to my college or university alumni volleyball alumni uh, weekend. And I was definitely the oldest person there, for sure. There were there were a couple people there who were freshmen as I was a super senior that came out, but almost everyone else was very much kids.
The point is, did you showing them the right way how to play volleyball?
Well, I was also with my son, and he's starting to play volleyball as well. So we were actually I don't think I ever even got to play with any of the guys that I played with. They were all playing on another court. And then when we showed up, we started playing on another court. It was actually outside on the grass. But there was so much different about I could barely even recognize where I was. And just like nothing looked the same. I felt really old there.
uh, I guess that's how they keep us humble on these reunions. They call them and show you uh, outside of making connections. That's cool. All right. So today's episode is about integrative medicine. We're going to talk about that a lot today. And I guess let's start with the first question. So we hear a lot about supporting the immune system, but you have said that phrase that phrase is very imprecise, almost dangerously imprecise. That's what your wording was. So what do we get wrong when we talk about immunity this way?
So yeah, you're right. We hear support the immune system all the time. It's on like practically every supplement label. Uh, but it doesn't really mean much unless we get specific, because the immune system isn't a singular thing. It's layered, and those layers have inputs and different things that support, or I guess that there are different things that support different layers. And you can see this kind of disconnect in the real world, right? We've all known someone who eats really clean food, exercises, they're very healthy, and they still end up with chronic illness. And so on one hand, you can say, well, their immune system, put that in little finger quotes, seems really strong on paper, if I can put it that way, but something is not resolving correctly. And that's when you have to stop and ask, or I guess you have to stop asking how strong their system is and start asking which parts are actually involved. Because if one layer is stalled or silent, I guess the rest might not respond to any particular issue. And that's the problem with most immune support strategies, right? They only support parts of the immune system. And when it comes to chronic disease, the whole chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And true support really means knowing which layer needs help and how to help it. Otherwise, you're just kind of pushing the noise into the system and hoping for the best.
Can you walk us through that layered model that you are saying that, there are multiple layers. So what each layer is responsible for, kind of like go over that?
Sure. Okay. So again, the immune system isn't really a flat structure. It's layered, and each layer operates not only, well, I don't want to say independently because they're connected, but on its own timeline and scale. All right. So you've got the barrier defense. That's your skin, gut lining, mucosal membranes. It's the first line of separation between you and the outside world. And I'm going to, let me assign kind of an importance percentage to each one of these. That one's probably of 25% importance to your total immune system. The next is local innate immunity. So there are a few specific local innate immune cell types, such as the tissue resident macrophages, which we've talked about a lot, because they're embedded in every tissue and they coordinate the entire healing cycle. But you also have to remember that any cell passing through the cell danger response is taking on local innate immune function. And so this is where all immune function starts and ends. It's where healing actually occurs. And that's probably what gives it an outside importance of about 35%. Then there's systemic innate immunity. Now, in truth, that's not really its own thing. It's really just the escalation and broadcast portion of the local innate immunity necessary to communicate to the rest of the immune layers. And so that's actually, this layer, the systemic innate immune layer, is what we detect via blood work. So inflammatory markers and all that kind of stuff, and, white blood cell count. And so because it's to some extent, it's not its own thing. I kind of want to add its importance, which is about 10%, to the local immune, to turn that into a 45%, almost half of our immune importance is local innate or innate immunity and its ability to communicate. So next one would be neuroimmune signaling. And that's basically how your brain and immune system talk to each other. So you've got the vagal tone, that the HPA axis, stress responses, all of that lands with the neurosomatic integration. And I'm sorry, that's what I call it. The neuroimmune signaling, neurosomatic integration targets that layer, and its importance is probably 15%. The only reason that I would increase that is because it is so often neglected, but we can talk about that later if you want. And then the last would be adaptive immunity. And this is what most people think of when they hear immune system. That's like B cells and T cells and, truly immune memory, right? So vaccines target this layer, and its importance is probably about 15%. So each layer has an independent job, but they do need to coordinate with each other, right? And, what happens in one does affect the other, but it's the local immune, the local innate immune layer. And I guess its importance emphasizes that healing begins and ends at the local level. And then the other layers really either just scale or regulate or remember that local response.
Yep. And much of the most salutogenic medicine today seems to be built on integrative functional medicine, right? So, and I think it's called the IMF model. So, can you walk us through how that framework works and share your thoughts on it? How you feel about that overall?
Sure. Yeah. So no, I agree. That's hard to say IFM when we're so used to hearing IMF. So hopefully I don't make that mistake. But yeah, the integrative functional medicine has made a huge contribution to medicine, at least from my point of view. It's a way to organize dysfunction into systems, right? Which helps move the conversation beyond just treating symptoms. And now practitioners can ask, where's the breakdown? Is it in detox, in energy production, in communication? And they do this. So they've structured, or at least this model structures this into 7 system nodes. You've got assimilation, energy, transport, biotransformation and elimination. That's one. Communication, and structural integrity. Oh, and defense and repair. And they built it around 5 inputs: diet, lifestyle, environment, psychosocial history, and genetics. So that said, there's a blind spot that keeps showing up. First, it treats the, put this in little finger quotes, the immune system, that's defense and repair, as a single entity. And it collapses everything into one node. The distinct layers make that a mistake because each layer responds to different inputs at different times and in different ways. So, and when you collapse that complexity, you miss, or you can miss, critical failure points. That's especially true at the local innate layer, which is responsible for both the beginning and end of the healing process, right? And then, I guess, secondly, the IFM model assumes that inputs act directly on systems. They don't. The inputs act on the immune layers, and those layers determine whether the systems gain or lose resilience. So, I guess I'll just say resolution can fail as well. We've talked about that if the CDR gets stuck, but that's actually much less common, right? And so if we go back, that's why even well-designed integrative protocols sometimes kind of fall flat and fail. Not because they're bad, but because they're incomplete. If you're missing support for a critical immune layer, especially the local immune one, or local innate one, and again, that's pretty common, you won't get resolution. And you can get partial improvement or a plateau. This actually brings up something that kind of frustrates me a little bit, I suppose, is that often integrative doctors they prescribe this vast array of supplements that can get pretty expensive. And that doesn't really do much for people who otherwise have a strong immune system. Now, I don't want to say that, we don't care about supporting the rest of your immune system. Yes, we want to. But if you already have a really robust immune system, doing some more general stuff to support it isn't really helping you because your general immune system isn't the problem. All of the different layers aren't the problem. It's one specific one. So I guess this is why I think that their model needs a slight reframe. Instead of inputs lead to functional systems, lead to outcomes, it should be inputs lead to immune layers, lead to functional systems, lead to outcomes. So their defense and repair needs to pull out of functional systems and actually be the input to the rest of the functional systems. And I guess, so if we care about outcomes, we need to understand that which inputs matter the most. Diet, lifestyle, and environment carry the most weight for sure. And that's clear with the integrative functional medicine models. Because they influence multiple immune layers. Psychosocial history matters too, but genetics shapes risk, not resolution, right? It's not something that we can work on directly either, at least not yet. And so I don't really believe that it kind of belongs in the same conversations. So I'm not going to talk about genetics too much at all because there's not too much we can do about it. Unless you're going to talk about epigenetics, and then that's all has to do with diet, lifestyle, and environment anyways, in which case. So if we can correct those two mistakes, then by treating the immune system as layered rather than monolithic, and recognizing that inputs support those immune layers rather than the systems themselves, we kind of open the door to better outcomes. So integrative functional medicine is really good, at least in my opinion. I guess an immune layered view would really complete that model.
Okay. And, I think I sent you this question separately, but, was like, there is obviously I'm seeing physicians who also says like, oh, we are more precision medicine, not integrative medicine. So, so are they going more layered base? Correct.
So I don't want to say that that's a bad thing, because our genetics do play a part, but honestly, they play a smaller part than you would think. So precision medicine really gets into, well, okay, let's look at what your specific genetics are, and but that also, again, that really helps you identify risks. It doesn't necessarily help you come to resolution of various things, unless we're going to go in and fix genetic problems, which that's not really happening yet. And precision medicine still ends up being cratogenic. It's just we're hopefully forcing actions more precisely rather than globally. And yes, that's better, but it's still cratogenic medicine, and it's still some person deciding what the cells should be doing. And until I would feel a lot better if doctors and scientists were really taking into consideration the cell danger response and what the cells are trying to do when they develop their cratogenic medicines and drugs, because they will probably be significantly better. We'll get away from, or hopefully get away from, situations where we're forcing actions where the cells aren't ready to do it yet. Now, you can argue that forcing an action that a cell is trying to do but isn't able to do well, okay, that's a different thing. But I'm not convinced that anyone's doing that at the right times, or always at the right times yet.
Would you
That
say
make sense?
Yeah. Would you say that if it works like that, how we want, how you envision, then in that case, really what we are saying in simple language, that probably we won't have side effects, a whole bunch of side effects.
Or at least not as many side effects. Because again, you have to remember, it's really hard to get one thing done, because there is so much interconnectedness between signaling and what occurs. I mean, ATP, right? That's what the cell uses as energy. Well, that's also a signal, right? If ATP is floating around in the interstitial tissues, well, somehow it came out of a cell somewhere. That means somewhere a cell has problems. And if we've got a lot of it, well, then that means a lot of cells have problems, or there's a really big problem. That's the signal. And so, on one hand, if you were to try and say, oh, well, these cells don't have much energy, let's figure out a way to artificially get lots of ATP there. Well, all sorts of other cells are going to flip out saying, "Whoa, this is a signal of danger. What's going on?" All right. So you're going to run into problems like that, where increasing one thing is also increasing the signal for something that you don't want. And, until we get a whole heck of a lot smarter, I think it's better to support the body because it generally knows what it needs to do. Right? I mean, again, if you're religious, you can say we were designed this way. Or if you believe in evolution, over millions of years, this is how our systems developed. And they're really, really elegant, where that exact same energy molecule is also a signaling molecule. We don't have to have two separate things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you say the local innate immune system is is the one most often ignored, right? And so why is that? Like, what role does it actually play? Like, can you go into deeper, little bit deeper into that?
Sure. So this is the layer where healing actually happens, right? And again, and I focus a lot on the tissue resident macrophages. They coordinate the start and finish of the cell danger response. They handle the cleanup, the remodeling, and local signaling to other immune layers. Or I guess the local signaling that becomes systemic, to other immune layers as well. But it's not just the macrophages, or even the other local innate immune specific cells that are part of this layer. So are the actual tissue cells themselves, right? So the structural tissue cells, they're all dependent on sufficient local resources to complete healing resolution. And when I say that they're part of this layer, they are the ones that actually go through the cell danger response. And that process is part of the innate immune system. And really, so what adds that kind of extra criticality to this layer, if you will, is that it determines the output of healing. Yes, it's what kickstarts it as well. And obviously that's important, but it decides whether the process, really the cell danger response process, finishes cleanly, or whether it leaves behind kind of unresolved stress or low-grade inflammation or scarring. In other words, it's what determines whether healing adds to resilience or subtracts from it. And we discussed this whole idea about increased resilience or adapting to increased resilience a long time ago. And that's kind of where everything starts there. So I guess I've seen what happens when local immune fatigue gets overlooked. My sister was incredibly healthy, right? Her diet and lifestyle have always been great, and her immune system, seemed bulletproof. Here's a good example, right? She already got COVID, and she had a relatively mild case, less than a week of symptoms. And this was back when, the world still thought getting COVID was a death sentence. But she, had kind of full confidence in her her global, however you want to put it, the way that we used to talk about immune system. So that when my wife, and I got sick with COVID, she actually came out to help take care of the kids because we got sick at the same time. And she didn't get sick again. That's how strong her immune system was and how much she trusted it. But she got cancer. And that's kind of when this hit me. You can have excellent, systemic function, strong adaptive memory, plenty of resilience overall. But if your local innate immune system becomes fatigued, and remember that's not like a monolithic thing in and of itself. That's all of the different tissues within your body, at different places. And if anything becomes fatigued locally, it can still lead to chronic disease. Why? Right? Because that layer, isn't just doing local cleanup. It's also coordinating the rest. And if it stops sending out clear signals, even fully functional immune layers may not respond correctly. But then also the cell danger response might not be responding correctly. And we now know that's what's really causing chronic disease, is when that cell response gets trapped in one of those three stages. And this is kind of another thing that makes chronic disease so difficult, is that it starts with the local immune fatigue, which doesn't really show up on lab tests very well, at least not easily. So conventional medicine focuses where the signals are the loudest and what we can measure the best, right? Conventional medicine zeroes in on adaptive immunity with vaccines and such. And sure, immune memory is important. But it's also the last layer to act and is on the lower end of that importance scale. Integrative medicine's approach does better, but it's still, my biggest concern there is they tend to overemphasize systemic inflammation. And that's a little misguided because systemic inflammation is an output. It's not, it's a symptom of a deeper problem, not a problem itself. But they sometimes treat it like it's its own thing, and it exists in isolation or something. And so really, right, systemic inflammation is almost always a response to something happening locally. Some tissues sending out the signal that something's going on. And if we try to just blunt that response, especially with cratogenic tools, we risk interrupting coordination between the different immune layers. The body ends up confused. And so you suppress the signal without solving the source, and now you've got uncoordinated activity, lingering dysfunction, and no clear path to resolution. I guess my point here is that current medicine puts too much emphasis on what we can measure easily and not enough on what actually controls the output. And to some extent, I understand that because it's a heck of a lot easier to work on things that you can directly measure. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons why, if we go back, that's one of the reasons why the metabolic theory of cancer fell out of favor over the somatic mutation theory, because it was, at the time, it was becoming easier to research genetics than it was metabolism. So we started looking where we could see well, not necessarily where the problems were. But again, unfortunately, local immune fatigue isn't really easy to measure. You can't pull a blood marker for it. I mean, you can kind of, but those are systemic. And then, once the signals are systemic, you don't necessarily know where they came from. What you can do is look at outputs, right? Is healing actually happening? Are the symptoms fully resolving? Really, is resilience increasing or decreasing? But even then, all that kind of assumes that you know where the issue started, right? So, before I get too far off here, let's back up. Given how often we're exposed to stressors nowadays, whether that's, chemical or emotional or mechanical, it's probably safer to assume that local innate or local immune fatigue is happening. That means it's probably wise to support it by default, even if proving it with a test is too difficult or expensive. It's that important. Remember, almost 50%, if you were to gauge things relative to everything else. And that's really the reason the layer gets overlooked as well. Not because it's important, but because conventional medicine focuses on adaptive immunity. That's what shows up in labs, antibodies and titers and response curves and all that kind of stuff. In integrative medicine, I guess, again, they do a better job at looking at the whole body and system a little bit more broadly, but most of its tools still kind of orbit around barrier function, diet and probiotics and gut protocols. All that is valuable for sure. But it primarily targets the mucosal immunity. And that's the layer that we can influence most directly through lifestyle. So it gets the most attention. But local innate immunity is harder. It's kind of, it's deep in the tissues and it's hard to track. And, that's why no one really targets it directly, not because it doesn't matter, because no one has a good model on how to reach it. And that's what I think really needs to change, because if local immunity is stuck, nothing will finish. And if it doesn't finish, the body doesn't heal. It adapts around dysfunction, actually. And that's not resilience. That's more like resignation.
And that is why we have the chronic diseases that prolong and continues for all seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now I know that there is an example that you gave me, like about shingles and chickenpox, and how adaptive memory can fail without proper signaling from the innate layer. So can you explain that a bit more, this example?
Sure. So this really has to do with the local innate immunity, how it is connected to and signaling to the adaptive immunity. And they're absolutely connected. So again, with chickenpox, so once you've had it, you've got adaptive, or your adaptive system remembers it. And the issue can be if your local innate layer is fatigued in a specific location, say your tissue resident macrophages aren't functioning well, you can still get shingles in that area. Not because the adaptive immunity has failed, it's because it just never got activated correctly. And the local layer didn't send the signal out. So adaptive memories is passive until the local innate system says, sends out the signal saying we need you. And that's the coordination that most people overlook.
And you said that the local innate immune system begins and ends all immune activity, right? So, but if I've had a disease or vaccine, isn't it my adaptive immune system that protects me? Because that's what, vaccines do.
Well, yes, it does protect you, right? So when you got re-exposed to the chickenpox, to get shingles, whether it was, still in your body and not completely deactivated, which, can apparently happen, or you just got re-exposed, you're not getting chickenpox again because that's a systemic response. You can't get a systemic response without the adaptive immune system seeing it. The problem here is that it's the local exposure from an area where there was some local immune fatigue that did not send out the correct signals to the adaptive immunity to come take care of it. Now, I'm not saying that didn't happen originally. When you got chickenpox, when you were a kid, if that's when you got chickenpox, or you got the vaccine for it, and unfortunately the vaccine's not quite as good of a response, but you should still have the adaptive immunity. That should be good. It's just, it doesn't know that the virus is attacking a specific area unless that area sends out the signals. And so in that case, the local innate immune system doesn't need to kill the virus because the body already knows how to kill the virus. It just needs to send the signal saying, hey, we've got a problem here. Adaptive immune comes in and says, oh yeah, I already know this guy, and they can kill it. That's the problem, is it's not getting that signal.
Let's talk about eyeball. So you said it does not stimulate the immune system. It nourishes it. What does that actually look like, and how does it relate to the local innate layer specifically now in this scenario?
Okay. So again, quick recap. Eyeball delivers ion-based cofactor nutrients that, zinc, copper, magnesium, sulfates, right to the site where they're needed. And these elements are critical for macrophage function, mitochondrial regulation, redox balance, and even apoptotic signaling. And I guess, as I pointed out earlier, even if your blood levels are normal, that doesn't mean your tissue levels are. And that's doubly true for stressed or damaged cells. Chronic cells not only increase nutrient demand, but it can also disrupt local delivery. And that result is local immune fatigue, where cells simply don't have what they need to finish the healing process. And this is where eyeball comes in. It's not trying to, boss the system around or force a shortcut or anything. It just gives the cells what they need to finish the job that they're trying to do. That's either recover and resume normal function, or in the case of severely damaged cells, initiate a clean, coordinated apoptosis. And that's important because many of the chronic problems we see today involve cells that should have self-terminated but didn't, right? And the main point here is that eyeball doesn't cryogenically force actions that might be wrong. And so, we've seen what happens when cryogenic intent I guess, backfires, right? Take that case where someone was told by a naturopath to use black salve to treat skin cancer. So this is a really straightforward example. It did kill the cells, and I suppose we wanted the cells to die, but we wanted that to occur via apoptosis, or the self-termination, not necrosis, which is, something else coming and killing your cells, which can cause lots of scarring. Plus, the black salve destroyed healthy tissue as well as the leaving kind of deep tissue damage, and that creates a whole new problem. We ended up having to use eyeball to support the recovery process, not just to eliminate the cancer, but to also help the tissue kind of regain its integrity, coordination, and resolution. And to be honest, I'm actually not sure at this point if eyeball use was started early enough to keep the area from scarring or not. So eyeball can keep tissue from scarring, but it doesn't really eliminate scars that have already formed. So in any case, killing the problem isn't always the same as completing the healing. Actually, I guess sometimes microbial interference really is the problem. And in those cases, the goal is to just kill it. Hopefully that can be done without killing us, the host. Ideally, you want to eliminate the microbial burden without compromising the host. And that's where eyeball really shines. But eyeball also, I guess it also helps eliminate the microbial residues and bioactive debris, like bacterial cell wall fragments and fungal particles and viral remnants that aren't completely eliminated yet. And it does that without relying on host immune expenditure. And you have to remember, those components can actually linger far longer than conventional medicine tends to recognize. And when they do, that keeps the immune system agitated, I suppose is a good word. And so eyeball helps neutralize those materials without requiring more energy from the host, from us. And it handles that kind of microbial cleanup without adding to the body's workload. Now, not cleanup in that you still need our detoxification systems to get rid of it all, but eyeball can wipe it out really well. But really, kind of the most important thing that eyeball does is it solves the problem with the local increased demand for nutrients, allowing the cells to reset the cellular signaling. So remember, when cells get stuck in that CDR 1, 2, or 3, they're confused and they're sending mixed signals or outdated signals, and eyeball gets to clear all of that noise. And it allows those cells to re-engage with the healing process and finish what got interrupted. That's why it works when other approaches don't. It's not pushing the system harder. It's just clearing the block and restoring the path forward.
What would it look like if integrative medicine actually starts using the immune layered model to guide care? Well, how it will change the treatments, I guess.
Well, so it would stop treating inflammation like something to suppress and start asking smarter questions like which immune layer is dysregulated, or where is the person stuck in the healing cycle. Instead of, I guess, then stacking generalized protocols, you'd start specific or targeting specific layers. So if the gut lining is compromised, which is pretty common, you support barrier function with diet and probiotics and such. If healing stalls in the same tissue, maybe the local inert layer is under resourced and needs support. If someone's chronically stressed or inflamed, maybe it's neuroimmune signaling that needs recalibration. The vagal tone and stress patterning and circadian rhythm. And I probably haven't discussed this layer enough because very few practitioners address it at all. Maybe we should have an episode discussing it.
Yeah.
But so you wouldn't treat systemic inflammation as its own target. You'd see it as a downstream signal, an output of another layer, which is your actual target. The goal wouldn't be to blunt the inflammation. It would be to identify and resolve the immune layer that's sending this call for help. And I guess, so adding immune layers to that IFM model, changes how we would then measure success, right? It's not just about whether someone's labs look better, which is, that's great, or their symptoms aside, that's good too. But it would be more about whether the immune layer is actually completing its job and successfully transitioning to the next thing that needs to be done. Some people need to repair barriers before adequate memory will do anything useful. Others need, local mitochondrial support before inflammation will quiet down. Let me return to actually another explanation for layered immunity, though, because I think this can illustrate a couple things at once. You can kind of think of them like runners in a relay race. Each one has a specific role, and success depends on handing the baton off cleanly, right? If one layer drops it, the next can't do its job, and the whole thing stalls out. And that's not always easy to measure directly, but you can often tell when one layer has done its job because the system stabilizes. Not only do symptoms resolve without new ones taking their place, but resilience increases. And the next layer, the one responsible for scaling, regulating, or remembering, can pick up the baton without confusion. So this model also helps you kind of see where the handoff fails, right? So you can support the right runner at the right time. And that's where cratogenic interventions cause problems, or can cause problems. It's almost meaningless to, if you force the next runner to just start sprinting before they have the baton. They might cross the finish line and the baton never made it. So you get some runners that are congratulating each other at the end of the race, but you never actually finished. And that really just allows the dysfunction to kind of change form. And honestly, this is where the IFM's multifaceted approach is incredibly powerful, right? They're already using diverse tools to support many of the system nodes, and that can prevent these breakdowns from happening. All that's really missing is that clearer focus on immune layers, specifically the local innate, and I guess I'll add in neuroimmune layers. And I think once that is part of the picture, the protocols don't just manage, or won't just manage, dysfunction. They'll help complete the healing cycles and process, not just suppress symptoms.
Yeah. And for someone listening, practitioner or not, how can they begin to identify which layer their current strategies are supporting? And how can they spot blind spots, the things that they did not know were there?
Okay. Well, so I would always start by asking, are any of the inputs way off, right? Are sleep deprived, nutrient deficient, chronically stressed? And that's, if so, that's your first priority. You have to remove this stress before you can add support, or you should. And integrative medicine already does this really well, right? And it's also becoming more mainstream. Conventional medicine might need a little bit of a kick in the pants here. But so then once you get to the protocol that you're going to implement, ask, what immune layer is this actually targeting? Not what's trending and not what, what's supposed to work, but what's it actually doing? And, I hesitated there for a sec because I was going to say not what feels good. But honestly, that's not a fair statement, because, believe it or not, feeling good or feeling better, is often one of the best indicators that we have that we're on the right track. The brain's really not very good at giving us real detailed diagnostic signals. But what it does have is that built-in shorthand. And the best one is, this feels good. I want more of it. It's not perfect. but it's often better than people give it credit for. So I guess that's it. It's worth checking. Is this supporting resolution or just giving me temporary relief? And we can walk through, a couple examples. So as I sort of mentioned before, probiotics mostly support barrier defense and local innate immunity, but only in the gut, unfortunately. Barrier defense everywhere. Cold exposure is another common one that actually activates systemic, innate, and neuroimmune tone. It builds resilience, but it doesn't, it won't resolve tissue damage. And this one's actually kind of interesting because it's essentially a workout for the immune communication systems by creating a local stressor everywhere, if that makes sense. And also that stressor is something that disappears as soon as you heat your body back up. And that's what we want for a workout, right? We want a big stress that our body's going to work on, and then it can go away and we can resolve, and add more resilience. You've got mindfulness. That's a pretty common one that also helps neuroimmune signaling and vagal tone, but it won't repair an immune stalled joint or organ. At least not very commonly. You've got elimination diets. They reduce adaptive burden and antigenic load, and that's valuable, but it won't rebuild immune precision. Sleep is actually really underrated, right? It recalibrates both neuroimmune and local innate coordination everywhere. So, and again, it's hard to talk about the local immune system as a thing because that can be an individual thing in any different tissue that you're talking about. When we're lumping it all together, it still gets a little bit confusing. But remember we discussed, when you sleep, in one of the past episodes, we discussed that when you sleep, your cells pass through the kind of growth and resilience phases identically to the CDR phases. Therefore, the better you sleep, or the better sleep you get, the more resilience that you can increase. And I guess then another really good one is metabolic flexibility. And actually, so remember talking about like the ketogenic diet is thought to like starve cancer because cancer cells can only use glucose, which isn't entirely true. And so then it gets a little confusing. And this is one of the problems that probably is why conventional medicine won't, or is hesitant to pick up this idea that a ketogenic diet can be such a good idea when treating cancer. But I suspect that a ketogenic diet isn't starving cancer so much as it is increasing metabolic flexibility. And that as metabolic flexibility recovers, because remember, most people are so glucose dominant that switching to a ketogenic diet helps their body regain metabolic flexibility. That metabolic flexibility allows or supports mitochondrial function. And that, I suspect, is a huge reason for the improvement, as opposed to just there's less glucose in the body for the cancer cells to use. Because remember, if the cancer cells they're just cells. As far as the body's concerned, those are cells. If they're demanding glucose, well, the body is going to produce it through gluconeogenesis. And the body will produce as much glucose as we need. That's part of the reason why glucose is not needed, or why carbs aren't needed, right? We need fat, we need protein, we don't need carbs. Our body can make them. And actually, you know what? Something of an aside here. I want to talk about the lumen again. So I've been using this a lot more, and I've never really used it to track fasting. I've used it to ensure that I'm metabolically flexible, waking up in the morning, burning fat. But I've tested fasting a little bit here, And it's a great device because what you can do is you know exactly how long to fast, whereas nobody else knows. You don't know. You start fasting, and at some point, your body says, "Okay, this is too much," and now your body starts through that gluconeogenesis. Your body starts to burn more carbs, and less fat, even though you're fasting. And this is the exact same thing. Well, where those carbs come from? Yeah, your body's making them. Well, but you ran all out. Well, okay, your body's just going to tear down some of your muscle protein and turn it into carbs. And that's really bad. So the lumen really helps you know exactly when to stop your fast. And I've been playing with it for the past couple of weeks, and I really like that. Again, as before, all I really did was make sure that in the morning I was burning fat, and if I wasn't, then I knew that my diet or lifestyle the previous day wasn't terribly good. Any case, sorry, I'll get back to it. So, yeah, lots of things can help, but very few things actually support the part of your immune system responsible for kind of finishing the job, the local innate portion. And I guess I sort of need to jump back for a second. And so I guess I need to explain because sorry, I'm kind of stumbling a little bit here. If the local innate immune layer is so essential, you can argue that, well, wait a minute, we've been eating food and supporting that forever, haven't we? And why is that a problem? And I think that, so perhaps I'm kind of discounting the support that diet and lifestyle supply to local tissues, because I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of after local immune fatigue has already occurred. And absolutely, a decent lifestyle, proper sleep, and good diet, all that kind of stuff used to be enough to maintain immune adaptability. Local tissues got what they needed, and resolution usually happened without any intervention. But today, with the kind of the chronic stress, environmental toxins, metabolic inflexibility, as we were talking about, nutrient depleted soils, so on and so forth, we're kind of burning through our resources faster than our systems can keep up, especially at the tissue level. And that's where the resolution actually happens. So the real problem is that chronically stressed cells, what I define as that local immune fatigue, require more nutrients than we can deliver systemically. So even if your blood work looks fine, your tissues might be starving. And if those local cells can't complete the healing cycle, then the innate system in that area stays in that kind of limbo, stuck between signaling and action, never kind of reaching resolution. And you could argue that, wait a minute. So really good systemic inputs, the diet, lifestyle, that kind of stuff, are absolutely, they're good at helping to keep you healthy, but they're probably not as good. Well, clearly, they're not as good at correcting chronic disease and local immune fatigue. And I don't know, I don't want to say it's a fool's errand, because we want to optimize those things as much as we can. That's what it means to live a salutogenic life. If you have chronic disease, you can try to optimize everything. But to ensure that level of precision probably requires genetic testing and a hyper-controlled environment, and frankly, a lifestyle that isn't terribly realistic in the modern world. Now, for a time period that you're trying to recover from chronic illness, maybe. But even then, you're still dependent on systemic delivery reaching stress cells, which often isn't enough, right? Yeah, I don't hopefully all that made sense. Because yeah. I realize that's something that, I've been presenting this in a way, and I could absolutely see you sitting there going, well, wait a minute, how is diet not helping the local innate immune system? Well, it is. Absolutely, it is. But it's once we become fatigued, or once we've got that local immune fatigue, then our systemic supply can't supply what's needed.
Yeah.
So all of this said, I can kind of recap or end all of this by saying, you don't need to be a biochemist. You just need a map, right? Because you can't support what you haven't identified, and you can't resolve what you haven't reached. So I hope we can start asking these layer-based questions. And that's really, so this is what it means to unlock health. Not by fighting harder to just kill things, but by supporting the parts of the system that we've been ignoring. That's probably the best way to end.
No, I like that. And just a little bit what you touched upon on Lumen's devices. So are you saying it's giving you more of like a accurate picture of fasting and when the body is really shifting gears, kind of like, and then that gives you like not only when to fast but also how much to fast, and then it gives you those time frames.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, all it really does is tell you whether your body is burning fat or carbs, or a ratio of the two, and how much. A little bit more fat, kind of 50-50, a little bit more carbs, or all fat. And so that really helps you know what your inputs, the diet, and in this case, it's mostly diet, but diet and exercise and that kind of stuff, what that's really doing. And so after most exercise, you want to see that you're now burning carbs, because that's how we get fast energy. And then definitely every time you wake up in the morning after the fast for the night, you want to have shifted back to now burning fat. And if you're not, it means that you're probably having too many carbs, or you've got metabolic inflexibility setting in. And that really can be one of the drivers to local immune fatigue, because that's not necessarily going to act on you in any one specific place, but that's acting on all of your tissues, which means that when any of those tissues are locally exposed to stressors, they're less able to respond sufficiently. And what the lumen is doing for fasting, right? So let's say, the intermittent fasting is becoming really popular. And yeah, it's a great thing. The problem is, when do you stop? How long is good enough? How do you know? And the lumen can tell you all of that. First of all, again, you want to be in fat burning mode in the morning. And then, if you want to try intermittent fasting, don't eat. And then an hour later, measure. You're still burning fat? That means that your body's still okay with the fast. Don't eat. Measure again another hour later. And if you're still burning fat, you're still good with fast. Measure again an hour later. If now your body is starting to burn more carbs than fat, well, that's your body's signal saying, I'm done with the fast. Now it's becoming more of a stressor to me. And that's when you can eat. Now, you don't actually have to eat carbs. You could actually eat fat and protein and see what that does. Now, if you're not burning more fat after that meal, okay, well, then maybe your body did actually want carbs. So, it allows you to get a lot more information that we could never get before. And really, let's go back to the whole thing with Otto Warburg and, the metabolic theory of cancer. I mentioned it this time as well, that one of the reasons that it fell out of favor was because it was harder to measure than genetics were. Well, this is a little device that suddenly makes this really easy to measure. I know what my metabolism's doing, whether it's burning fat or carbs. So I can improve my metabolic flexibility, which really is kind of, as I've sort of said before, that's sort of the start of everything. Mitochondrial function is almost synonymous with health.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And with that, I think we are close closing our episode today on that. And by now, also Lumen should sponsor this show.
Yeah.
for
Nice.
yeah, it would be nice, and especially it's working. Seems like you have, yeah, from a user's perspective, you're sharing that too. So, uh, and once again, thanks for your time. I think it's we went a little overtime at the end, but I think it was important to make that distinction, that how you're saying, how exactly the layering works and how exactly it's important to go about all those things. And now the question is, uh, how we can see this change on integrative medicine, and how integrative functional practitioners can go by layers versus just how we go right now. That's a tough question to answer.
Well, actually, you kind of made me re-examine that. So probably what I should have been saying is not that we are not supporting the local innate immune system sufficiently. It's that we cannot support local immune fatigue sufficiently. I guess that's the distinction I should probably make.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. On that note, we will end today's episode. Once again, thanks for sharing all the insights, and thanks to our listeners. You can find the show on the show's website, powerofsalutogenesis.com, or wherever you find or listen, watch, wherever Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find it. Keep coming back to our show. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.